But what I want to start with surfing. You're a surfer. We talked literally just 1 minute ago about you going to Santa Teresa in Costa Rica. You're out in Cascais in Lisbon, which is kind of the surf town. And I really believe there's a lot of parallels between brand building and surfing. So there's the kind of the leap of faith, like leaning into fear and taking the wave, wiping out. Like when you're building a startup, you wipe out all the time, and it's like how you get up from that wipe out. In researching Liquid Death, 2 words came up all the time: creativity and audacity. And I love those words because I think so many brands want to be audacious and creative, yet there's often a gap between actually doing it, and it's almost like catching that wave, actually leaning in and being creative and audacious. And I saw that video you put on your LinkedIn of that fucking nut job who was surfing down Nazare on skis.
Chuck Patterson,
Chuck Patterson, yeah. Like I was like that small video, and Nazare for listeners is like one of the. It's like what is Nazare, just to give some context?
So Nazare is the biggest surfable wave in the world. It's about 2 hours north of Lisbon in Portugal. And yeah, the place is like, I think now it's kind of almost turned into the Colosseum of big wave surfing. You can kind of go there at the cliff and watch it. And it's absolutely insane. And Chuck's like, he's kind of like, if there was like a He-Man of action sports, it's Chuck. He can ski, he can surf, he can snowboard, and then he's got this thing where he skis on big waves. And he recently did it a couple of weeks ago in Nazare, and it's absolutely it's just mind blowing.
It's wild. Like, because I watched that documentary with the guy who found Nazare. I don't know, the American guy.
Garrett McNamara. Yeah.
Yes, that's it. And then I watched the documentary. Is it Kenny Lay or Kenny Lai? The guy who does all those fucking weird spins on the wave.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, Kenny, the guy with the long barnet? Is it Kenny? Or have I got his name wrong?
I'm not sure. No.
Anyway, so it was really interesting. But to my point, there's I'll put it in the show notes for listeners. There's this video of this guy called Chuck who's basically going down a wave that looks like the size of the fucking Shard in London, and he's going down it. But it's like there's so many lessons for challenger brands. It's leaning into fear. It's the bumpy journey. It's the holding on by the kind of holding onto your seatbelt kind of thing. But I'd love to know, and we're going to use this as a lens to explore creativity and audacity. But I think to start, I'd love to know, and I think you'd said that, you'd surfed in 30 different countries from Israel to West Samoa. What's been the best wave of your life? And like, could you paint a picture of what that felt like? Describe that feeling.
It's pretty tricky to sort of pick one. I mean, I've got moments from different places. I mean, probably most recently, not last Christmas, the one before, we did a road trip from here to Morocco, and I surfed like on my own during Christmas. It would have been better with mates and with some people, to be honest. But I was kind of stuck on my own out there at like a pretty famous wave, and it's like one of the longest waves in the world, and it breaks for about a kilometer, maybe a bit longer. And I just couldn't believe that I was just out there, like on my own, like no one around. Maybe because of the time of year, I'm guessing. But that was like 3 days just sat out there. I'd come back, see my family and my kid. I'd be like, yeah, that was amazing. I scored. And they're like, they don't care. But they're like, where are we going to go for lunch? But yeah, I mean, that's probably like, that definitely stands out as like a recent trip. But also over here in Portugal where I live, it was one of the main reasons why I moved out here. The waves are amazing. There's lots of different places where you can go, whether it's sort of beach breaks for learning or some heavier beach breaks through to reefs and points. And it's got a bit of a mixture. And like the waves in Nazare, people think that like I don't surf them. I'm rubbish, right? I'm not going out in any of that big stuff. But out there, it's kind of it breaks pretty consistently at a large size, so you can go and watch it. And it sort of the season starts in November until about March, and that's just wild to see that size of just the power kind of behind it all, and witness it right on top of the cliff top. So here, Morocco, probably are the ones that kind of stand out most recently.
I think the point you said there about, and I think it does relate to the founder's journey, is like when you're out there on your own, because I think a lot of founders who listen to this podcast, there's something inherent about having to be the one out there on your ones. Ultimately, when all is said and done, it's a kind of, it can be quite a lonely journey. So I think there's definitely parallels there. In terms of like, I think that another common theme is like this leaning into fear. And I think there's definitely, whether you're a brand starting out, whether it's catching a wave or going to a Tesco buyers meeting, there's an element of leaning into fear. Talk to me about like how you process fear as you're going into like a scary wave or a scary situation, like, and then, because I think that could be really helpful for listeners in when you've got to face fear in any facet of life.
I think it's just it's kind of doing it incrementally and building up. Like no one kind of goes into it and go, oh, okay, I'm going to surf a 15, 20-foot wave like tomorrow if you haven't started off, on half a foot or 1 foot and kind of like learn and progress and build up. It's almost like to give you an example, when I was a kid, I had a pretty bad stutter. I'm dyslexic. I hated reading out in class. I'm lousy at public speaking. So when COVID kind of kicked things off, and I was like, okay, well, I've got to do, like, my business is sort of taking a bit of a nosedive. I've got to do something. And I started doing a live podcast, and it absolutely petrified me to do something recorded live where, anything could happen. And you do it again and again and again. And it's just repetition and practicing. And it's the same as kind of, like you said, like getting in front of a buyer, like going to a buyer's meeting or something, and just doing something that scares you enough when then it just becomes less scary. And you thought, like, now, like, I love it. And it's sort of like, if I do public speaking, it kind of, I get a kick out of it, but that would have been way scarier than dropping in on a wave for me.
But I think that's super valuable for listeners in terms of the reps thing. Because I was the same. I started this during lockdown, and I generally believe for the first 30 episodes, I was just, before Charlie Bigham, it was like I interviewed Charlie Bigham, and I was generally pacing up and down my flats, chain smoking cigarettes because I was so nervous. I was like, I can't do this. And then you do it enough times, and the feeling is the feeling goes from nervousness, I think, and it kind of dissipates. And the more reps you do, it turns into excitement. I think nerves and excitement are kind of two sides of the same coin. In terms of this creativity and Audacity, so I want to talk about your relationship with Mike Cessario, if I've said that right, mate, the founder of Liquid Death. And I read a quote: through Liquid Death, Cessario and his team demonstrated that even the most mundane products could be made exciting with a little creativity and a lot of audacity. I would love to know, like, what are the 1 or 2 leadership lessons you've taken from Mike, specifically on building teams that do creative and audacious things? What have you learned from Mike specifically?
I think it's sort of, when you look at what Liquid Death does, or in terms of the brand and the content, it is about sort of, I guess, being like, that term gets thrown around quite a bit, but like it is the, like, being authentic, the authenticity of it all, where like people within the company, they're not trying to pretend to be something else. They're like, okay, well, if we're going to produce content, how can we make it funny, and how can we get it out there into the world where we're trying to entertain people? Like, no one wants to see an ad they just switch off as soon as they know that they're being marketed to. It's the reverse of that. So it's like, okay, well, if we're going to do something, let's do something that, like, what do we find funny, and what would our mates find funny as well? And it's it's that message that then comes across as like, oh, well, like for example, Mike grew up playing in punk bands, and he's a skateboarder. He snowboards. It's all this. It's all this kind of these subcultures that interconnect, and the people within the company, like, they kind of live and breathe certain elements, certain aspects of these subcultures. Um, Whether it's art, music, action sports, whether it's like horror movies, or they're huge comedy fans, or if they're comedians, things like that. So the people like that, that's one thing that sort of on the creativity side, and then obviously taking a chance, putting content out there. We're still in startup mode, so you can kind of act quite quickly with things that are kind of happening within pop culture, instead of, if it's a huge massive corporation, just jumping through all these kind of loopholes to get everything done. So that's quite exciting, but it is down to like building, getting the right team, getting the right people involved that obviously get it, but they're part of it, and they are these subcultures, whether they're musicians, whether they're athletes, whether they're artists.
What you said there about we're still in startup mode, I think it's really fascinating. There's a book I read called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, which I just read it in Costa Rica actually. And he basically says innovation is always a bottom-up thing. So it's like when you're small teams, it's really easy to innovate because it's kind of when you start out, you're the founder, maybe 3 or 4 people like yourself in London. You can speak on Slack super, super easily. If you've got an idea, as you said, you can react to pop culture really, really easily. That's super easy when innovation comes bottom up, and like creativity comes from bottom up. But when it comes top down, which is kind of more the sterile, typical corporate company, then it becomes really slow. As you say, you've got to go through the loopholes. You've got to get everything has to get signed off with a meeting about a meeting about a meeting. It's a complete rigmarole. What I find fascinating is these businesses that are global, a bit like yourselves, like Who Gives a Crap, the toilet paper brand. I interviewed the founder of that the other week, Simon. Is how you, as you're getting bigger, quite literally in terms of distribution around the globe, team size, how you kind of navigate that paradox of getting bigger but staying small. Like, could you speak to that?
I think so. I think it's kind of like with these things, like having the right foundations in place. So, for example, when we're trying to grow out internationally, it's kind of looking at the core, like the core elements of the company, whether it's like marketing, sales, operations, and then in terms of sort of what we're doing internationally is sort of, okay, what worked in the US when they started 4.5 years ago, and how do we replicate that in the bespoke market and kind of put our own spin on it, but how did that work, and then how are we going to execute that in another market? So sort of taking it from the US and then looking at the UK, when we launched in April, for example, on my end, looking at lifestyle marketing and product seeding and making sure we're in contact with the right people, getting it in the right events, right venues, and having that roadmap is really, really beneficial. So you kind of look at it and go, okay, well, this worked, this didn't. This is how we're going to grow it out. And yeah.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Honestly, means the absolute world to me. I'd be so grateful for a small favour, please. It is so hard growing a YouTube channel. It is so bloody hard. If you please enjoy these videos, just click the subscribe button. More subscribers equals bigger guests equals better conversations, and hopefully you can learn more as you build your food and drink brand. Thank you so, so much. It's fascinating because this is what I was talking to Simon at Who Gives a Crap about. Is we were talking about brands with humor, and Who Gives a Crap, the name is quite colloquial, so it's like the Brits get it, the people in the States, the Americans get it, the US get it. But I was like, how do you then go and take that cheeky kind of banter, that was sounded cringe, cheeky banter, how do you kind of take that colloquialism and put it into, say, Germany, or put it into, say, Japan, as you become a global brand? I love the nuance between US culture and UK culture. That's something I just find wildly interesting. Is there an example where something's landed in the US, but then how you've had to tailor it? I mean, the obvious example of this is the US office versus the UK office. Very similar programs. I think the first season was written by Ricky Gervais, but the actual execution was pretty different if you actually look at it like that. And I'd love to know how that works in marketing with Liquid Death.
I think it's kind of looking at things where everything that we're doing at Liquid Death at the moment and how they've scaled it. Like now, like Liquid Death is the third biggest drinks brand in the world on social media. So we've got 7.4 million followers across TikTok and Instagram. That has all the content, everything that how they've done that has all been done internally. So sort of looking at that and going, okay, well, what out of those out of that resonates with an English speaking audience. So like we recently launched in Australia, for example. It's going absolutely crazy over there. Big sort of obviously connections with the Aussie market, with the UK market, with the US, same mother tongue. So looking at those things, it's kind of okay. Well, these are going to work. Sometimes maybe if it could be, say, a US sport, for example, it may not resonate in the UK or in Australia as strongly as it does in the US.
Is there an example of that?
I think there's kind of, I mean, there's things out there, there's campaigns that we've done, say if it's been for NFL or NBA, there are huge audiences in the UK and Australia. But for example, for say, give the UK example, it's not as big as football, right? So it's kind of like, okay, well, and then if you were to do something that was just UK specific, this will all come in time, like I imagine, and then you're kind of adding in the complexities of language and localization. But it's kind of, I guess it's like finding those core crews and tribes that are that get the music, whatever genre it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be metal. Everyone kind of thinks of like Liquid Death's this like, you know, scary goth metal brand. It's kind of looking at it going, okay, well, like the whole thing is going, okay, how can we entertain people? The fact that it looks like a beer, there's certain things that people like about the brand, and also that then crosses over globally. So you could be in Japan, you could be in different places. That as it kind of pops up in new countries, there'll be groups and cultures and bars and subsectors, skateboarding community, for example, or tattoo culture. They'll all get it because of all like just the funny campaigns that we've been producing that then kind of go viral. They would have seen it a lot. There's a lot of like, and we know this from just sort of the fact of like people buying merchandise sort of outside, like globally outside of the US. So it's not like the drink it's available in more and more countries and that's all coming, but you can kind of look at it and go, okay, well, where are people purchasing from? Where are the followers coming from outside of the US market? And that was sort of like a key with the UK was like the second biggest audience. So it was just a natural step to kind of have that being, you know, the main sort of international market outside of the US first, before then exploring all these different other markets.
Yes, it's like in terms of what I think is reassuring for people listening to this is the strategy of still Liquid Death is to still on that adoption curve is to find the early adopters or like your tribe or sub tribes, so whether it's metallic heavy metal bands, skaters, surfers, fill in the blank, who no matter where you are in the country or the world will still get it, and then use them as almost a microphone to make it over time a household brand. What you said there about it being people think it's a craft beer. So I 100% met you at Coffee Fest last year. So I remember taking 2 cans back to our stand. I was doing a bit of consultancy for a chocolate brand called Islands. And they're like, mate, what the fuck is that? You having a pint? It's like 11 a.m. I was like, no. It's Liquid Death. But it's obviously I knew it all the time knew all about Liquid Death because I find it a sick brand. What have been some of the kind of unforeseen challenges in getting Liquid Death going in the UK? Because as you say, it's lots of people know about it, but there's also lots of people that don't know about it. And how do you get those people brought in? Do you see what I mean?
I think you hit the nail on the head with early adopters. So it's kind of if people see it at an event, or say it's like a skateboarder that they follow, or an artist or a musician. Firstly, it's kind of, what is that? It looks like a beer, or it looks like an energy drink. What they're doing? Like, I still get funny looks if I'm on the underground and I crack one open at like on the district line at 8:30 in the morning, and people are like, what is going on? What's this guy like?
Yeah.
Is he drinking? But
like
then it's sort of like, is that some special brew? But then it does kind of go, and it sort of goes from that to going like, okay, take it in the US, for example. It's in Target, it's in Walmart. In the UK, we're in Nisa, Co-op, Whole Foods, Tesco's. So I guess the mass adoption, that you kind of look at it and go, okay, well, it has to, for us, it's like, well, we're going to support and we're going to be in the right places. So whether it's like these cool rock bars, dive bars across the UK, like these are these are our people, right? So it's kind of like, it's there first, and then like it slowly kind of expands out. But for us, it's sort of, it is that thing of like, okay, well, there's also this issue of like, okay, if it just goes too quickly and it's everywhere, and then it's trying to get that brand's recognition, and people knowing that it's here or knowing what it is, and then they sort of see it through people that they're either word of mouth or people that they follow online.
The store supply. So I think it's fascinating as a brand your size. We talked about innovation being bottom up versus top down. I also think it's fascinating that a brand your size, with your kind of budgets coming into the UK, still builds the brand bottom up, i.e., granted, you've got the Co-op and the Tesco's listing, but you're still finding those right indies, those right wholesalers that put you in the right spots. They may not be the volume spots, but they're the right brand building spots. What was your and I know we kind of touched on it there, but if we were to kind of zoom out, so you meet Mike, he says, I want you to take this this job, or like, we want you to build Liquid Death in Europe. Talk to me about the first time you met him, and then we're going to get onto the strategy stuff, but I'd love to understand that first interaction, how that manifested.
So it came actually through a guy called Steve Nielsen, otherwise known as Sticks. So Sticks is heading. This is a time, I think we're having conversations. Like he came onto my podcast, so I've got an action sports podcast. His background was in he was one of the first sports marketing managers in the US at Red Bull, and then he went over to Pabst beer, and he did like a kind of 10-year at both companies, all around lifestyle marketing and getting product out there. So it was sort of a similar thing to Liquid Death. He was one of the early employees at Liquid Death, where he was brought on by Mike to then go, okay, well, how are we going to grow this thing? He brought in a team of professional, like professional skateboarder, snowboarder, a porn star, someone in the adult industry, someone like legit proper rock stars, who then had all these connections. And we were always in contact, and I was just like, let me know if anything, when you guys are going to come over to Europe, and if there's any way I can help. And then he just reached out and said, okay, well, like we're looking for someone to basically essentially do what I'm doing over in Europe, and we're going to need people in all these different markets. And do you know anyone? I was like, yeah, I mean, I'd love to kind of put some ideas together. And then that was it. It kind of went on from there, where we were kind of looking at it going, okay, how do we sort of going back to what I was saying about taking what works in the US and replicating that? So it's like, how do we take it from sort of, people knowing about it in LA and Miami and New York and all the kind of the major hubs in the US, or now everywhere in the US, right? Everyone knows about it. And looking at London first. And we launched during London Coffee Fest, and that was sort of for us kind of getting it in different places. And then the US guys came over sort of end of May time as well, and they were like going around to not necessarily like exactly what you're saying. It's not like the biggest places, but it's getting it in those like core, like cool cafes and bars and restaurants, and then building it out that way. So yeah, it was kind of Sticks was like, let's try and get it going over there, and we'll start in the UK and then take it from there.
North Star, get listed, stay listed, and grow. Do you actually know your shopper? If you don't know your shopper, you're literally pissing and spunking money up the wall. Knowing your shopper is the secret weapon to unlock more grocery listings and more stores. But not knowing your shopper is literally like driving in the dark, hungover, without a sat-nav, in a thunderstorm, in February with 5 miles of petrol in the tank. But knowing your shopper is like having a sat-nav. A full tank of petrol is a glorious sunny day. You're listening to the Sugar Babes and you've got a fresh, hot, pumpkin spice latte by your side. North Star Illuminator is the shopper map to the promised land of growth and success. It does 3 wonderful things for your brand. 1, make your marketing budget sweat. When you've got lucid, crystal clarity on exactly where each precious penny is going, you know how to drive loyalty with existing customers or even bring new shoppers into your brand. Numero 2, what's actually driving performance? Do you actually know why your sales are going up and down? You need to know, like, are you bringing new shoppers into the category? Is that driving growth? Are loyal customers buying more of your brand? Are shoppers switching in and out of your brand versus other brands? I mean, Perfect Head's a glorious example. They are bringing new shoppers into sports and energy. They are so incremental versus, say, chocolate bars, where people just switch in and out of brands all the time. The more you know this, the more oomph you've got with your buyer when you go to do a marketing plan, a joint business plan with retailers. The buyers want to know how incremental you are to the category. That is your passport to success. North Star is your passport. And what you can do is you can literally see it by channel, by retailer, get so specific. If you're looking to go to the next level, honestly, get in touch with North Star and go to the promised land.
Delighted to announce the extension of our partnership with the wonderful Billy and Paul from Mackenzie Jones, but even more exciting, they have just launched a brand new brand as part of Mackenzie Jones called MKJ Ignite. MKJ Ignite is a recruitment firm which specialises full shebang, focus entirely on challenge brand space. They work with some incredible brands, Lucky Saint, Good Rays, Purdy and Fig, Hunter and Gather, and Real Superfoods. They can support with your hiring needs across all levels, top to bottom, junior entry-level jobs, all the way through up to MD and CEO level. So if you're looking for a field sales stomper, a sales wizard, an ops guru, a supply chain sensei, you name it, MKJ Ignite can help you out. And look, if you're looking to wet your whistle, ignite your curiosity, then check out the poddy we recorded with them back in July. Laden with wisdom, all about like do's and don'ts of hiring and like how to create the perfect job description. You will love it.
So this term, and I think I'd love to talk about your relationship with Sticks as well, is lifestyle marketing, and Red Bull are just the best. I think in my opinion, there's no one who's done it better in terms of all the sponsorship of the extreme sports people. The guy who jumped out, the Russian who jumped out the fucking thing from the space, like that is just wild. What is your definition of lifestyle marketing versus traditional marketing? Like, what's the difference and the nuance, do you think?
So I mean, I guess like the lifestyle marketing is kind of like getting your products or getting your brands in front of the right people and into the right places, essentially. For us at Liquid Death, it's credibly integrating the brands for no cost, where other brands have to pay to get their way into. and we do that through our network.
Wait, sorry, say that again.
So it's credibly integrating the brands, where other brands have to pay to get their way in. So, for example, if they're dropping big sponsorship money on certain, say, I don't know, Instagrammers, for example, for people in the company and how they've grown that is that all these people that we've done things with, we're either friends with them or we have a connection. So a lot of the people within like the big campaigns, they're ambassadors and / investors of the brand of Liquid Death, whether that's like, Tony Hawk or Steve-O or Travis Barker or Wiz Khalifa, and the list goes on and on. They're all like the people that kind of are involved with Liquid Death have that network and have those connections. So it's almost like, I don't know, like looking at it where we're not trying to kind of barge our way into things that we know nothing about, if that makes sense. So it kind of comes from these subcultures, and then it sort of grows out from that.
Yeah, because I always find, I think every challenger brand wants to be a lifestyle brand, quote unquote, but it's not as there's a lot of nuance to it. I think I see some brands in the UK who just do an amazing ATL campaign, and they've got enough awareness, and it drives enough sales, the team grows, etc. But to actually break it down into like a lifestyle brand is, I think it's almost that the Champions League of challenger brands is when you become a lifestyle brand, I think. And I think Trip is a great example of someone who, in my opinion, have done that. But it's a kind of that sweet spot at the top. So you said so they had all these links to these, Travis Barker, these comedians, etc. In the UK, are you trying to replicate that with other links? So like, would it be a comedian in the UK, or how are you leveraging that knowledge that works in the US and bringing it across the pond?
Yeah, so everything, I mean, it's pretty grassroots. But for example, like my background is in I've got an events and festivals platform called Rad Season, and through that then came the Rad Season podcast. But I've, like, in past industries, been involved with action sports, been involved with events and festivals. So it's kind of combining all those like past contacts. So for example, last year we were kind of backstage at every single major rock, metal, punk festival in the UK. So you go to one of these festivals, Liquid Death is in the VIP area. It's on stage. It's back of house because of those kind of connections. And then it would be the same if you sort of see it popping up on podcasts potentially. It's the same thing as well. So it's something that we don't have those budgets, no matter what people think of, like the energy drinks of the world, where they can pay serious cash to do things. So we have to kind of be smart with it and go, okay, well, how do we get our brand out, and how do we kind of do it in a way that, one, isn't pushing it down people's throats? Like we don't put our logo onto anything, but you see it at the parties. And now it's almost tended to this point where the can has become an accessory. Like it's like a fashion accessory. So if you go into, like, I don't know, an art exhibition opening, you'll see it at certain events, or if you go into a fashion show or backstage at a gig, it's sort of, it's becoming something where, like, people will then reach out and go, oh, like, can we get some Liquid Death there? Where if they were looking at another brand that didn't have that appeal, they'd be like, oh, we just want you to sponsor it. We just want your money. Like, it's 20 grand. It's got to a point now, because of all the epic work that they've done in the US and how they built up their following. It's almost like a kudos. Like, if there's some association with Liquid Death, then there's a huge benefit. Obviously, over 7 million followers. If we're posting and resharing, there's a massive benefit to the people that we're involved with.
that rather kind of wanky phrase that your distribution is your marketing, and in terms of putting this through to how you be a lifestyle brand, it's like if you then are distributed in places where people like to talk about their lifestyle, and the brand becomes an accessory, i.e. an art gallery. People will put on their Instagram about their lifestyle. Oh, I'm at this sick art gallery. Oh, by the way, I'm having a liquid death. Oh, my lifestyle is at a festival. They're going to post it on social. Oh, here's my accessory. So it's almost, I like that link between, yes, distribution is your marketing, but actually if you go further and you actually look into where people lifestyles playing, then that's how you can kind of leverage a lifestyle brand. And I think that's really helpful for people who may not necessarily have the budgets of, I'm not saying you've got huge budgets, but like who are just starting out. Like you can still run that. I think Moju did a very good job of that. You know, Moju, who are in there with stores as well, who are great.
Yeah.
In terms of so what else has Mike kind of taught you about this sort of creative, audacious leadership style? Like, because I know we've talked about innovation coming from the bottom up, but also I'd love to see how it works from the top down. If that makes sense. If it's a top down structure, I don't know how it's structured at Liquid Death.
Sure. So I mean, in terms of sort of what the focus is, and like the last couple of years has been building it up. So it's now kind of looking at like on the lifestyle marketing side of things, like what do we focus on? What are the areas? Comedy is absolutely huge for us. So that's something which is then like top down. It's like, okay, how are we going to make our friends laugh when we produce campaigns, and how are we going to break the internet? And it's sort of looking at it and going like, we're not like worried about what other brands are doing. We're like, it's more people's attention spans when we produce content and when we put it out. So are people going to share it? Are they going to engage? Firstly, will they find it funny enough to then do that? You know, then it kind of gets pushed out. So it's like doing that and sort of doing that well and repeating it. You know, it's hard enough doing it, you know, as you know, right? Like kind of doing it once or twice, let alone sort of constantly doing it. So it's looking at that and going, okay, how do we own comedy? How do we kind of, how can it be a brand where like it's turning from a product was like when it started off, it's like it's a water brand, it's a soft drinks company, it's a healthy food brand now, going to it's a healthy products / entertainment company, like a Red Bull has a Red Bull Media House for entertainment. It's kind of like, you know, you kind of look at these things and going, okay, well, if we produce something, people will wait and go, okay, well, what's coming up next? You know, it's like that sort of shock kind of value of like, what are they going to produce? What's coming out? And if people get Liquid Death and they find it funny, then, you know, it's like it's pretty clear that they'll sort of wait around and go, okay, when they do something again, they're kind of expecting sort of that level of humor and that level of entertainment, instead of kind of pushing a certain kind of product down people's throats. It was always sort of looking at like products that were unhealthy for you, I guess, initially would get to have all the fun. So that was something that Mike would say is just like, well, why is that? Like, why is sort of, you know, whether it's like the pizza companies of the world or sweets, candies, why are they getting to have all the fun with advertising? And it's sort of, you look at like the water market, something that is the most like impactful and healthy thing for you in water, but it was like generally kind of stale sort of marketing campaigns, and there was definitely a gap for that, which Mike saw and go, okay, let's try and build something around this, and water was one of them.
The what you said about doing it consistently, like making people laugh or make the content go viral. I think the I don't know what the one of the guy with the thing going like that. Basically, I don't know how to best describe it. Like that was absolutely jokes. The I'm trying to find what it's called. How fast can you blast? Like that was hilarious. And for anyone who hasn't seen that, go and watch it because it gives hope that brands can still be very boisterous and rambunctious and cheeky. I saw a picture on Liquid Death's Instagram, which I thought was really interesting. It was, the old adage of Apple, which is think different, and you've got the apple and it's the rainbow colors.
Mm-hmm.
There was a picture and it said drink different. It's the Liquid Death skull and it's the same colors. And it said something about this is our operating system. The quotes, sod's law, it's not coming up on my notes here. But I thought that was really fascinating. I'd love to know what this Liquid Death specific operating system is on the foundational level, that when like on the surface allows you to do these sick things consistently. Because I think in those foundations or pillars, I think there's a lot to kind of pull in and tease out there.
Yeah, so I guess to quote like Andy Pearson, Andy's the head of creative, is the creative director at Liquid Death. I mean, he sort of has said something like he gets asked this quite a lot, and it's almost like Liquid Death it's like a character, so it's evolving, and it's something that you kind of you don't really know what's going to happen next. Like it's sort of, we look at it and it's not like, okay, well, we're going to bring out this campaign in sort of 12 months time. Things evolve and change quite quickly, and it's sort of looking at something, okay, we can do this is funny, let's get this out. And then obviously we're in conversations with multiple people about who we bring in and what we do. So yeah, it's kind of looking at the brand, looking at Liquid Death as sort of, it has these core kind of pillars of like the name, for example. It's like, it's Liquid Death, death to plastic, murder your thirst. So there's this sustainability message for us is sort of like, okay, well, one, like trying to get people to drink more water, but also the issue with plastic pollution, and we put a portion of money and profits back into like helping reduce plastic in the world's oceans and lakes and seas. So making sure that the cans they're 100% recyclable, and that's a big part of it as well. So death to plastic, reducing plastic, and you just have to kind of go into any shop or store and you see all the plastic bottle, the single-use plastic bottles. So it's like, okay, how can we kind of improve that situation? And that's sort of, I guess, the sustainability sort of messaging. Whereas the high sort of level is, okay, it's comedy, it's humor, it's entertainment.
Yeah, it's fascinating understanding how the two align. I even think the name, just Liquid Death, I think some of the best brand names are kind of juxtapositions. I read I know Liquid Death's not the obvious example, but Rude Health or Lucky Saint, there's something in juxtaposition of brand names. And I think what you've said there about you've got two opposing things. This is David, I think it's John Hegarty, the guy who did Saatchi and Saatchi. He wrote a post on LinkedIn the other day about, he got asked a question, is how do you make black more black, as in the color black more black? And he talked about putting white against it and using a zebra to, like, the zebra was the picture and it brought out the black more. And I think there's something in when you have, as a brand, you have two opposing things that create this kind of friction and energy. Lucky Saint have it as well. Like I spoke to Luke about the word lucky and getting lucky. Their values are getting lucky, be lucky, but they've also got Saint, which is devil in the detail. This will, fastidious attention to detail. But these two things align, and this magic happens. Same thing with Rude Health. We take ourselves seriously, but take our product seriously, but not ourselves too seriously. I think it's super. Yeah, just understanding how the operating system works. How many people have you got in the UK? Like, and what's the split between UK and US? How big's the team?
So it's still pretty small in the UK. and it's sort of something that we, as it grows over here, we would then expand out on it. But the majority is, you can imagine, like our office is, our head office is over in LA, and then our headquarters for Europe are in London.
And how do you find leading the team from Lisbon versus London? Because I know for a fact I've got loads of mates who are founders who would love to be able to. There's almost like a fear in their soul that if they leave, not that they leave the team to it, they want to be so close to their baby that they can't have that space. Like, what's that? Describe that experience for you living in Lisbon but building a brand in the UK.
It's like, I mean, it's manageable. It's very manageable. I mean, I can be in the city from here, from home, for meetings at 11 a.m. for example. So I can get.
What if you get flights?
It's the first flight is at like 6:15 from Lisbon, so I can get into town pretty quickly. And I'm regularly over. So, and also, I guess being based here, as it then expands out into different, as we go global, it's, I'm everywhere. So it's like, if we look, like, for example, we're in the Czech Republic, we're in Scandinavia, markets over there. So it's kind of, you like, one of the main reasons why I moved here is it is 20 minutes from the airport. So I can get places fairly quickly. But I understand what you're saying with that, of the whole working remote thing and being away from your team, from the office. We're in contact daily, I'd say, either if it's via Slack or Messenger, or and it's kind of having that sort of, and it's remote in the US as well. So it's having that autonomy where you're going to get the right people in who are going to get the job done, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's operations, finance, whatever it may be. It's like they're going to do it. And if they're somewhere where whatever it is they're into, then they're going to be happier about where they are. Therefore, they work harder, if that makes sense.
Oh my God, I am so excited. It feels like Hungary is finally swimming in the big leagues. I can't believe this. It's absolutely mental. But delighted to announce that Big Fish, yes, Big Fish, are partnering with the podcast. Perry's been on the podcast 3 times. Listeners absolutely love it. Some of our most downloaded and cherished episodes of all time. But Big Fish are behind literally so many brands in your cupboard, in your weekly shop. Charlie Bigham, Year Valley, Tyrrell's, Clipper Tea, Goo, Rana. I mean, mate, the list is longer than the River Nile. But they also share risk and invest in brands that they really believe are a force for good. That are brands that they believe are going to be the next big thing, like Howder, the snack that gives back. But even more exciting news, Big Fish want to speak to the next wave of small challenger food and drink brands that are destined for big things, the raconteurs, the movers, shakers, buccaneering visionaries. So look, if you want to speak to Big Fish and just have a chat, get your brand in front of them, then drop me a message. My mate Louis from Local Beer, Amazing Beer, was in their office, aka La Fish Bowl, last week, chatting to Perry, Freddie and the Big Fish crew. So drop me a message if you would like to speak to them. Bohemi, our beloved sponsor, are helping build the fastest growing challenger food and drink brands. Look, if you're a small brand just starting out and you need your first indie stockist, your first 100 stockists to wholesale, Bohemi are the platform to categorically speed that up. But if you're a big brand wanting to get bigger, Bohemi are also insane. They make field sales marble smooth, silky slick. They're just epic. Oli's been on this podcast twice actually. They saw a 29% uplift in sales when using Bohemi to check major malt listings availability. Insane. 29% uplift by downloading an app. Insane. Lucky Saint, my boy Aaron Duff, who's coming on this podcast in a couple of weeks, he uses it to manage a team of 30 people, and they've, Lucky Saint, have unlocked 500 draft listings by using Bohemi. Look, you've got to get involved with this stuff. It's absolutely insane, and it will categorically change your life. It's just the sickest platform. I use it all the time at Islands. Who gives a crap have a completely remote culture as well. I think it's really interesting. Simon was like to me, he goes, mate, if the surf's good, like the team no fucking Zoom calls.
And I just thought that was such a sick way of saying it. It was like, don't like we need to work hard. So he talks about life work balance. It does sound a bit, instead of work life balance, life work balance does sound a bit David Brent, but it was like, I thought it was a really interesting point of like, actually, yeah, if your life and your work, if you can get that blend of sweet spot between work and play, like your team are just going to work harder. I'd love to know what have been the challenges in terms of Co-op and Tesco, or just grocery in general, in terms of, I totally get the early adopters. I get the skate parks, the cool bars in London, people lapping it up, London Coffee Festival. Then trying to grow Liquid Death in Darlington, Rotherham, Middlesbrough, like Liverpool, like maybe not Liverpool, like other towns where there aren't the early adopters. Like, how are you navigating that? And
so yeah, I mean, I'd say there are, like, I mean, I'm like dotted around, like, say for example, like Liverpool, like, so I've done trips, and sort of the focus is kind of working on like going to all of these places and going, okay, like who are those early adopters in like Liverpool, like massive music scene, huge uni, some cool like bars, skate shops, tattoo shops, like coffee shops, record stores. That all that thing, every single city, every single place has, like, especially in the UK, if it's a certain size, has that. So it's just then go, like, if we know people there, or we get introduced, friends of friends, whatever it may be, and then it's getting it into those right places first, and then it just expands out into that. So that would be the same whether it's Dublin or Prague or and I'm off to Denmark tomorrow, to Copenhagen. So it's that kind of it's that kind of going, okay, well, we know what worked in the US. We pretty much know what worked, like when we went into London, into the UK. What, like, that will then, it's very replicable, especially from those scenes. So it's like, where are those cool dive bars? Where is that street with all the vintage stores on?
Yeah. So what that's, yeah. And then essentially, so say you're looking at the UK as a whole, you're almost having 5 hubs. So maybe the way I phrased that first question was potentially wrong. Instead of not, I know there's kind of the early adopters in.
Oh, so from the locations, you mean? So like,
yeah. So as in like so. Say you have the UK, and you have like a hub in London, hub in Bristol, hub in Birmingham, Manchester,
yeah, Edinburgh,
Liverpool.
for example. Yeah,
exactly. So you've got these hubs. I think it's just fascinating for brands. You then go to these hubs and find the early adopters, whether that's the cafe shops, the skate shops. But then how do you? That will do a lot to drive your rate of sale nationally. Mm-hmm. But then how are you trying to target, say the someone said this to me from Unilever, is like, where brands as much as they should be finding the early adopters, they need to think, how can they drive the rate of sale at a Tesco or a Sainsbury's, Tesco Extra or Sainsbury's Extra, if that's what they're called, big Sainsbury's, whatever the fuck it is, at in between two kind of satellite towns. Like, you know what I mean? Like, almost, how are you kind of navigating that? Because I get the early adopters bit, but it's the other part of the equation.
So I'd say, I mean, we're kind of like on that side, we're all kind of looking at, like, say, flagship events as well. So festivals for us, like Live Nation, they're an investor / partner in Liquid Death. When we launched in the UK, we went into, I think, 19 of their music festivals. So this year, for example, we're like the presenting partner for Download, which is in Donington. And perfect fit for Liquid Death. It's kind of the biggest rock alternative metal festival in the UK. We kind of look at these like festivals or big events where it's not necessarily going to be, it's people coming from all over the country, essentially, if they're into that particular like style of music or sport, then comedy show, like whatever it may be, it's then kind of that draws in the people, and then they see it there, and it's that kind of experience of people having a good time, having Liquid Death in their hands, resonates with them, and then they sort of turn into buyers.
In terms of the liquid death thing, we'll kind of get onto your podcast in a sec. And I think I listened to a few episodes, and I thought that was is it Stacey, the guy who did Dogtown Z?
Stacey Peralta.
Yeah, I listened to that. I thought it was a sick conversation. I actually learned a lot. But I'd love to kind of to bridge these two kind of separate things. Is what do you think the unfair advantage people in liquid death, like what are the brand building lessons from extreme sports that you can apply to brand building that brands who aren't surfers, who aren't skaters, who aren't going out surfing 3 times a week, like what's the unique thing you get as a team, as a business, that other brands don't get? Like, what's the secret kind of thing?
I mean, from an action sports perspective, or just doing anything hard.
From the action sports perspective, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be like skateboarding, surfing. I guess in terms of skating, if you're trying to do anything, if you're trying to learn a new trick, you're constantly falling, you're constantly failing, and then you're getting up and you're attempting to do it again until you complete it. So the link between, I guess, sort of people that are skaters or people that are involved with action sports, whatever that may be, it's having that kind of grit of not giving up. And that is something that is almost ingrained in you because it's just kind of what you do. So that there's definitely a strong correlation, like starting my own company to being involved with this, it is definitely helped.
Yeah, I find it so fascinating. It's the grit to keep going back again and problem solving. That's vital in brand building. The other thing is, we briefly touched about it in the introduction, but it's like wiping out. And actually, every part of the failure piece is every brand says, "Oh yeah, failure." I think what I haven't actually talked about in the podcast before is how to stay calm when you're wiping out or things are going Pete Tong. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe we could talk about wipeouts when you surf. Like, I've watched quite a lot of this. I know Shane Dorian's talked about the big wave surfer, and Rogan's talked about this suit thing you've got.
Yeah.
But like, what's when you get wiped out and you're pulled under and you're rolling for like 2 minutes? What does that feel like? Describe that feeling, and then how are you staying calm? Like, what are you doing in your brain? Because I think that will help a lot of people who say today they're having a fucking shit day. Like, there could be a lot in terms of staying calm.
For me personally, I always think that like I've been in worse situations. So I kind of like, I try and think
a worse situation.
Well, I try and think like, okay, well, like I've been like either the waves have been bigger, or I've caught my like leg rope around a rock, or it might be sharky. There's definitely been situations where like, so like yesterday it was kind of, I was out surfing yesterday afternoon when I got back, and it was fun. It was pretty big. There's a big set came, you take one on the head, you get pushed under, and you kind of like, when you're under, it's like your body kind of goes into like, I think you kind of go into that mode where you panic, and like you're just thinking in your head, and you go like, okay, now just like stop, take a bit of time and just think, like it's been bigger, it's been gnarlier, like you've got through it, it will be okay. And at that time where I think everything kind of hyper focuses too. So if you're like taking off on a big wave, or you're dropping off a cliff on a snowboard, or hitting a jump on a mountain bike, you get really, really focused, and everything that doesn't matter, you drop it. You're not thinking about like what call you've got coming up or what meeting you have. Thinking about how you're going to like survive that split second. So you then go, okay, like, when you're underwater, you have to relax, because if you start panicking, you're going to run out of air faster. So when they do the big wave training, there'll be like for Nazare, for example, or for Jaws in Hawaii, like these are like the top, like 1% of the 1% surfers. Like no one else can do this. Like it's really like, it's pretty unique. But when they're training,
how many surfers do you reckon? Sorry to interrupt. I'm just so
Yeah,
fascinated by this. How many surfers in the world do you reckon could surf Nazare?
It depends. I mean, if it's paddling, not many. If it's towing in, more. But then it's like, it's.
In the hundreds,
I really don't know.
Yeah.
Probably,
Yeah,
it's probably
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's definitely not in the thousands. It's definitely in the hundreds, and it's sort of it's a unique thing of like people that actually then want to go and do that when it's that big, and that's that's unique in itself. Like millions of people surf, but a lot of them, and they all like appreciate Nazare, but a lot of them they won't want to go out there, even if they get the opportunity.
Yeah. Oh god, no. That's when I get over to Lisbon. Well, I may miss the boat, quite literally miss the surf if I'm going over in May. But I really want to see it because it just looks sick. But sorry, so you were saying, sorry I interrupted, but you were saying in these guys get trained, and we were talking about staying calm and not panicking under pressure because that's a universal principle for anyone building a brand.
Yeah. So I'd say like with the training with that, I mean, they're in the pool and they're doing like breath work essentially, underwater, staying underwater, getting rolled. So, and then it's sort of knowing that their equipment is up to scratch. So in putting that in like the business context, it's sort of, doing training, making sure you're kind of, you're doing your research before you then like are prospecting before you do your course, like things like that. That's how it would correlate. I mean, it's doing your homework and then putting it into practice, basically,
and staying calm.
And staying calm.
You said, oh, when I'm under, like when I was under yesterday, I always think this could have been worse. Like, what's been the most like, oh my fucking god, I could die moment for you, like underwater, and like, how long were you under?
There's been a few. Probably I was in Taiwan like years ago, maybe like 9 years ago, and I came off a wave, and it was rocky, and my leg rope, like my leash, got wrapped around the rocks. And I was basically like, and then 3 set waves came, and I couldn't reach my ankle to undo my leg rope, and I was getting held under
because you were getting pulled down so much.
Because I was getting pulled down and pushed away from the rock, and then eventually I got to it, and I had like my head was under, and I was like waving at my wife. I was like, "Hello," and she was like, just like like waving back, just thinking like I was like trying to like call for help. That was pretty freaky. And then I've had I've had some boat accidents and stuff like that in the surf in Central America and places, and
boat accidents.
Yeah, like we were out once on a boat, and like a set wave came, and the guy that was driving the boat.
When you say set wave, sorry for interrupting. I don't know.
Yeah, it's basically like a series of waves came. So it's like three waves, like one after another.
Yeah.
So they came along, and the guy, it was like one of these like wooden open boats with like little benches, and he didn't see it, and he saw it last minute, and he just hit the engine and the gas, and the boat just took off, just flew out of the air. And this thing was about maybe 25 foot long, and it just went vertical 25 foot, and I was at the front, and I just fell from the top of it. So it wasn't necessarily surfing, but I mean, it was a surf trip. Like, we were looking for waves. So there's just sketchy things that can happen. And I guess like one that's kind of like if you're doing any of these like sports, it's a little bit, it's risk taking, but also, anything can happen if you're traveling or like crossing the road or doing anything, right? So it's sort of like you just you never really know 100% you don't know what's going to happen. It's kind of just
this is so, what you've just said there, you don't know what's going to happen, so just roll with it. I think that is kind of succinctly summed up what it means to be creative and audacious in marketing. As much as it is to be creative and audacious in riding waves, you don't know what's going to happen, just roll with it. And I think what you've done with Liquid Death, or what everyone's doing, it is that kind of, we can move quick, like we don't know what's going to happen, just roll with it. And I think that's a delicious insight for people who are starting brands. let's talk about your podcast. And you said at the beginning you had a stutter, and that was kind of the reason for. Well, you had a stutter as a kid, and and then you struggled with that, and then you started this podcast. How did you go about? I always find this fascinating because I do it as well. As like how you go and get guests. Like, how did you go about getting Wim Hof? How did you? Because Chip Conley, I've listened to him on Tim Ferriss before. He's just unreal. Like, how did you go about getting those amazing guests?
Mainly just like I email them. So I'll just drop them an email out the blue and sort of keep it short and to the point. And a lot of it sort of, I guess after the first couple, it just comes with like knowing that they're like the people that you've had on before are friends with them. Yeah. The Wim Hof one came because the podcast turned into a TV show. So I pitched him first initially. I was like, do you want to come on my podcast? And I think his daughter or something who manages him just got back to me. It's just like, how big's the audience? I was like, oh, it's not that big. It's getting bigger. And then I just heard no reply. And then 3 months later, the podcast turned into like a TV series on Fuel TV, which is like an action sports channel. So then it grew quite a lot. So it kind of jumped up from, like a good couple of thousand per episode up to like whatever it was, like 50,000 plus per episode, just from being on the TV series. And then I was like, Vim, do you want to come on now? They get back to me within like a day, and they're like, yeah, we can organize that. So I think it just depends. And like the stuff with like the Stacey Peralta episodes, like that was filmed for an event that they did for his movie, which Patagonia set up, the brand. And it was he directed a movie about Jerry Lopez's life. So Jerry Lopez, like one of the most famous, iconic Hawaiian surfers of all time, Mr. Pipeline.
I was watching that last night, mate. Literally watching the first 10 minutes of that last night because I was like, I didn't realize that was directed by him. I was literally watching that last night. Yeah.
So he kind of directed that out after like he did a movie called Riding Giants, and then obviously like Dogtown and Z Boys, and he's done a few others. But Stacey's like one of the icons of action sports, specifically within skateboarding, but then also like film directing for that genre. And he was like one of the first to kind of do it. So yeah, having like speaking to those two it was unreal. But that was all like, again, that was like part of something. And one thing I've kind of found from the podcast is sort of it definitely opened up different doors. So whether it was like it turned into like commentating on surfing events through to like hosting conferences and just all this weird stuff that I would have like 100% never have done beforehand.
Sick. Yeah,
like I'd just be too nervous or like worried to do it. And then kind of, turned into working with Liquid Death, and it's definitely, it's been fun.
Are you looking to turbocharge your brand, take it to another level, save money, save energy, save stress, save time? Well, I've got the perfect thing for you. I am delighted to announce that HC Brands, formerly HC Consulting, my boy Harry Clark, has just launched a commercial growth accelerator program designed specifically for challenger food and drink brands. You can upskill your commercial team. They've got so many modules. You can handpick them where you can do the full shebang. You're going to save hours of research. You're going to get the tools to turbocharge your growth, get better clarity on your brand's objectives and directions. And look, Harry's worked with some amazing brands, Holy Moly, Islands, Savile, and Rooted Drinks. He's really helped me with a strategy for Hungary. Yeah, if you're looking to turbocharge your brand, link in the show notes, and you're going to be able to do that easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
There's a guy I follow, which is if you just post once a week, which is what that's the cadence I'm on now. Like, it's the passport. I think he talks about YouTube. It's like it's the passport to extraordinary, and it's like it's the same with Hungary. I'm like, some of the people, even just speaking to you today, I'm like, this is sick. Like, you get to speak to so many interesting people. In terms of how did you prep for the because again, like I think there's lessons in this in terms of prepping for a Sainsbury's meeting and Tesco meeting. Like, you can either over prep, like I've had it before. I've done way too much prep, and the conversation feels very robotic. But then I've also had it when you don't do enough prep at all, and it's like, where's it going? Like, what's your prep process?
If it was It depends. I think sometimes it's kind of after doing, I don't know, I think like over 100, like I've done over 100 podcasts and, way more interviews. So I think it's kind of like at the beginning, I'd always over prep because
same.
I was like, I don't know, but then it's kind of, it was definitely like, it's less fun because you know what they're going to say. So you're almost kind of like, you ask them something and you got an idea what the guest is going to reply. That's not, and then it's not as like you said, it's robotic, it's not as natural. So now I think it's like, if you could do a bit like maybe I'd listen to one podcast about the guest, especially if it's sort of like, mine is almost like a diary of the CIO, but for action sports people. So, or for founders of action sports companies. So kind of knowing too much, you obviously know a little bit about them. And if you know everything, then it kind of, it comes across a bit strange maybe. So I do like a little bit, maybe like, an hour or two, depending on who it is. And then that would be it. Have like a real rough guide of what I'm going to talk about, but it's almost like it is past, present, future
it's like
stuff.
dropping in. It's like catching a wave. I find is before, like when I started, I was trying to plot every single point, whereas now I have a little bit of prep as like almost that's the jet ski pulling me into the wave, and then once I'm in, it's just like let's see where it goes.
And you just go with the flow with it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
I had one, and like I asked the guy how he was doing, and he just said he had a car crash the day before, and I was just like, okay, well then like the whole everything just goes out the window when they say something like that, and he was like super vulnerable, would talk about anything, and you kind of, it's almost like you just have an open chat. And I think sometimes I've kind of been like trying to be too scripted because I wanted to get certain elements out of it. Like, and then like drop in for quotes, and I was just like, yeah, I can use this and I can do that. And I think it's just trying to kind of go with the flow, and then also like thinking, okay, well, what if I find it interesting, then the audience would too, hopefully.
Yes,
and then you kind of like build that trust with the audience, and then that's been quite good.
There's a quote I love by Rick Rubin, which is "the audience comes last," which I a bit like what we said with Liquid Death. If I ask questions that I want to ask because I follow my curiosity, and I think if I like it, someone else will like it. If Oli likes this question, someone else will like it. Same thing with Liquid Death. If we like this marketing that makes us laugh, it's going to make someone else laugh as well. What if you could thread the theme? This is quite a hard question, but if you could thread like a needle through all these wildly interesting extreme sports guests, is there like a common trait between the 100 or so you've interviewed that has been responsible for their success?
I think they've like probably dedication is one of the main things. I'd say passion, but passionate. But then I mean, there's sort of like that is there's levels of that, and I think kind of putting in the time. Everyone always sees these things of like, okay, yeah, some of them have got more natural talent than others. But whether it's the case of like, like Stacey creating these movies, he's like, it's not just like he's did one or like the one gets the Grammys, and it's like, it's like a 30-year build up of all these different like skate videos that he's produced that then the mainstream may not know about that existed beforehand. So it's like it's putting in the hours, putting in the time, and working really, really hard on it. And like now it's kind of like with all these athletes, like they're in the gym, they're eating right, they're not pounding energy drinks. Like they're like they're athletes. They're not like kind of, especially the ones that are then trying to push it to say to that Olympic level or the contest kind of surfers or skaters. Maybe it's a little bit different for some of the more kind of the ones that if it's kind of more lifestyle based, but even that, like if anyone kind of wants to be on top of the game, you've got to train, you've got prep, and you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't do that, it's not going to materialize.
Is there anything else that you could, if you had to thread a needle through, other than dedication?
For all of them, I don't know. It's tricky.
Yeah, it's I'm always asking the question myself through every food and drink founder I've asked. It's hard. That's why I said it is a hard question, but it's that dedication's 100% one of those things. But I also think it's like it's everything that sprawls off the dedication. So it's not giving in to no, it's the discipline.
Yeah.
What out of all the conversations you've done, what's been like one conversation that really kind of hit you so palpably here? Like you're like, wow, maybe it was the guy who had the car crash, but who really kind of taught you a sentence of wisdom or something that really kind of changed your worldview.
Yeah, that's tricky too. There's been a few. I mean, I've had like, and the guests have been quite varied in age. Chip said something cool. Like Chip Connolly, he just said like always be curious, and I like that. That's something that kind of stuck. Because his background and how he came on the podcast is he used to have a events and festivals platform. He sold it, but kind of, I think it was sort of during the time he was advising for Airbnb at that time, but it was kind of after he had his hotel chain, and he just said that he's kind of, it's completely different to what he was doing. He just basically wanted to go to all these like weird, crazy festivals, and that's what I love doing. So he would go to like baby jumping festival in Spain, where they kind of jump over babies, or Tomatina festival, or Holi in India, and he'd kind of go to all these weird things, and just because he was just curious about it and he wanted to learn something new. Or if it was like he learned how to surf when he was in his 50s, I think. And then he learned Spanish, tried to learn Spanish late, so learning it like a second language, and like always having that curiosity of something new. I think when I was younger, like for me personally, when I was younger, I was always like, I was just so stuck in. I was like, I'm just going to surf, I'm just going to do that, and that kind of dictated everything, which is kind of what I wanted then. And then I got a little bit older, and I thought, okay, well, like what about other sports, other things to do, or other like different ways of thinking, and that whole like being curious and kind of being open-minded was something that I took away.
I think we've both got to that answer in terms of what's the common thread. And I would say it's absolutely dedication, but it's also absolute curiosity, because I think curiosity is the birthplace of creativity. Creativity is the way around problems. How did you get into surfing if you're from Wimbledon? Like, how did you? That's what I want to know. Like, it's.
So I grew up kind of skating at South Bank, on weekends as a kid, and and then from that, I used to go down to Cornwall. Like I was working in Farringdon, and I kind of leave like on Friday and like drive down with friends and go surfing down in Newquay, or go to Croyd in Devon. And kind of started off bodyboarding in Spain as a kid. Like my dad's been living over there for like 35 years, so I go and like stay with him, and we'd kind of go in the sea there, and then Point Break came out and everything changed. That was kind of like an absolutely massive movie at the time with Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves. Show my age here. They made a new version of it, but it's not the same. But the original was absolutely amazing, and I think it was probably like my favorite film when I was about 12, 13. And that was definitely a game changer in sort of wanting to learn how to surf, and then just became obsessed with it. Went over to Costa Rica when I first went there, I went there for like 3.5 months, and just with the main aim of just like, I'm gonna learn this somehow, even if it kind of breaks me. I'm just gonna keep on doing it. And it was just like again and again and again, like 6 hours every day in the water for about 3 months.
And so, what was that? Was that in Puerto Viejo? Were you there in Puerto Viejo? I can't. My Spanish is.
I was in like Dominical, Santa Teresa, Tamarindo a little bit, and then a little bit on Puerto Viejo as well. But then also like kind of went into like El Salvador and Guatemala and a bunch of a few of the other kind of neighboring countries around Costa Rica. And yeah, I got the bug ever kind of after that, and then that was it.
And when you surf now, are you trying to get better, or like are you just trying? Now you've got kids and a wife and stuff. Like, what's your mindset when you surf now? Is it to get?
I just kind of, it's just like almost like going for a jog. I just kind of do it more for like mental kind of like just to yeah, like mental productivity, you could say, like kind of get out and just get a bit of me time, like between sort of say working with the families, can kind of just get out and it's just quiet. Yeah. And now it's kind of, I don't know, I'm doing a little bit more like mountain biking and like trail running and things like that. Sometimes you get in the sea and it can be pretty crowded and you're like, oh,
yeah, fuck this.
It can be more stressed.
Yeah. What time do you usually go then? Is it like in the before work, or is it like a
normally before, yeah. So it's normally like first thing in the morning, or like I do the drop off. So like after I've dropped my kid off,
nice.
I'll go there.
I want to talk about strange festivals. That's the name of your, that's if I got that name right?
For
because you set up the events company that does all these weird and wonderful.
So Rad Season is the company.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, right. So where did if we can like trace it back, where did this fascination and obsession with the weird come from?
So I've got a bit of a connection with Spain. So I've been going to Spain ever since I was like a baby, basically every year. And there's so much crazy shit, like religious, weird, quirky festivals that happen in Spain. I just found it really intriguing, and I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And then when I was on my honeymoon about eight and a half years ago, going through Central America, and I was like trying to find events and trying to find these weird things happening. And there was no like kind of like at that time it was like Lonely Planet guidebooks, or even if you go online you can't really find much. It'd be like Day of the Dead in Mexico City or Cinco de Mayo, things like that. But there was no like one place where that had them all in. So when I got back to Australia where I was living, I thought, okay, I'll like try and add all the events that I found fun, and then I kind of put them like into the sheet. We hired a developer, and then that was kind of like, you know, the company was kind of born from that idea of like, okay, well, where's all the like fun, quirky, crazy festivals in the world, along with action sports events and music festivals, anything that I think, okay, I'll, like, what's a bucket list event or festival that I want to go to? And I'd go on YouTube, research it. If I saw a video and if that made me excited, I'd add it to the site. So it wasn't necessarily about, okay, is this going to get the most eyeballs, the most traffic? Looking back, that was probably should have been the main thing to look at. But I was like, oh, is this fun? Does this look cool? Let's put it on the website, and then let's try and go there. So then when my kid was 2, we left. We emigrated back to Europe with the plan to move to Portugal. And in between leaving Australia, we had about 3 months. I think we went to about 25 festivals, maybe just over, which was like on paper, it's just like, oh, this is a dream. But with a 2-year-old, it was pretty tricky. But some of them we kind of just go into these, like, you know, there's this festival in the north of Spain called the Batalla de Vino, which means like the wine battle in Haro in Rioja in the wine region. And they basically had like 30,000 people go in a vineyard, and they have a wine fight with super soakers. So they just like fill up these water pistols, and everyone's just like running around. And the farmers have got these like almost like those fertilizer guns, like these heavy duty, and they're just like literally like with hoses just spraying everybody. So that kind of stuff is sort of like, it's so unique and it's so like not in your day to day that it was just it really appealed. And then when you start digging, you're like, oh, there's like World Bog Snorkeling Championships in Wales, or there's like cheese rolling in Gloucestershire, which is like, they're just mental, these things.
Closes this loop like this quite interestingly, because I think a few things what you've said there, mate, in terms of one, the audience comes last, that Rick Rubin quote. It's like you could have put these bigger festivals on, but I think by following your curiosity, you create something unique. Same thing with Liquid Death. And then also what you're essentially doing, like this Super Soaker Ryoka battle, is essentially like a little mini cult. So you're infiltrating these little mini cults, or like the Bog Festival, Bog Snorkeling Festival. But then to our point about small brands sponsoring these events, I think Rude Health sponsor that.
They do.
Yeah, they do. So it's like small brands don't have to go and sponsor Download Festival to get that brand awareness.
Yeah.
You can go and do these little things. What else were some of the weirdest? We'll wrap this up shortly. Just a few more things, mate, because I'm really loving this. What are some of the other weird festivals you saw? Like, what was the most, like, you went there and you came home, you were speaking to your kid or your wife, and you were like, that was wild?
A lot of them revolve around food or religion. So there's another one in Spain called Haramplas, which is in like Extremadura. It's kind of like on the west coast of Spain, inland. And a guy dresses up as a monster in this like iron suit, and it's like paper mache, and he's like supposed to represent the devil. And he runs through the town, and they drop off all these like turnips, and they're frozen. So it's so cold that they just freeze. It's in the middle of winter, and he runs into the crowd, and everyone's just lobbing turnips at this guy in this suit, at this like monster devil thing. And you're thinking like, oh, you rock up to this town, and there may be like 10 people doing it. You go there, and there's like 10,000 people like throwing turnips at this guy, and he's just like running through these like tiny little alleyways in this like medieval village in Western Spain. You're like, what is going on?
Jokes. Yeah,
it's absolutely wild. So that was probably one. On more of a like something that less painful would be like Songkran in Bangkok in Thailand, which is a water festival. Again, it's like just a massive water fight, but the whole city kind of does it. So you've got like 1 million people running around with like super soakers and water pistols.
That's so jokes.
So all those kind of things, like they're super fun, and they're so unique to that area. It's like tricky to then replicate it. I think like I'd love to go to like Holi in India. I think like, like Color Run and stuff. So it's like they just like throw like all this like colored powder at you, but it's just like literally like just millions and millions of people. So it's almost like how, like, I don't know if you've ever seen like Color Run, for example, when it's like a 5K run and they kind of like give you some like powder and you wear a white t-shirt. It's like that, but on steroids, right? So it's like millions of people in a city. There's one in the south of Spain near Granada called Cascamoras, and everyone gets covered in like black, like kind of like black oil. So like and again, it's like thousands of people do this, and they chase this guy who's known as the Casamoros. And the story is that he's like, historically, this guy stole a statue of Virgin Mary as a bet from one village, and he had to take it, the neighboring village, he had to take it back to his, and all these people would chase him. And that's kind of like, you chase this guy and he's kind of got this like flag and he's like waving it, but it starts off at the top of this like sort of big hill, like smallish mountain, and everyone's just covering themselves in this like black oil.
That's hilarious.
And then it just ends up in a huge party at the end. But there's like 30,000 people, like, and everyone's just covered in oil. It's crazy.
There's definitely I love that those festivals you've been to is kind of like an interesting lens to explore human nature, and that I think humans have this idea like to escape the mundane and also to like have connection with other people. There's two things, and I think they're actually applicable to brand building as well, because it's like, how can your brand, like Liquid Death, like the face thing, whatever it was, can you have those moments of like escapism from reality, but then also connection?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say from going to all these festivals from infiltrating these cults. I feel like you're almost like the Bourdain of weird festivals. That sounds sick. Like, what would you say some of those lessons you took from all these fucking weird festivals that you applied to Liquid Death in terms of, as you say, you're the head of cult indoctrination now?
I think it's that community and that experience, and you're bound by, in the case of the festivals, you're bound by that weird experience because everyone's in it together. It's almost like if you go to a Tomorrowland, or you go to a different festival, you're taken out of your normal kind of day to day, and you're plonked in this weird situation, and you go, okay, well, I'm here. I'm either here on my own, or I'm with my family, or I'm with friends, or with complete strangers. You all have that kind of like bonding moment. So it's something like that then you're like, oh, I'm not the only one that is into this. There's 100,000 other people that love it as well, or there's 100, whatever it may be. It's kind of, you've got that connection, and I think that's something that you feel like, especially when you kind of like look at things like different music genres and things. So you're like, oh, like I always feel like I'm a little bit of an outsider, or I'm not really in. I'm a bit extroverted or whatever it may be, and then you go to these places and you're like, oh man, there's like all these people that are into it as well. It's pretty cool.
What kind of music would that be?
So I'd say something like, well, like for example, if it was sort of like a download, like a rock, like something that's rock, something that wouldn't be like kind of, it's not super mainstream, and yeah, you get there and it's like absolutely heaving. So I think for me, it was always like, it was like punk rock growing up wasn't that popular in the UK. And that was sort of something that, I go to gigs in London at different, like in different venues, and then it would be heaving. And then you just like realize, like coming from like, especially outside, if you weren't like kind of in the hub where all the bars are, as a sort of like late teens, that kind of thing. And that was kind of, it's that kind of appeal of like, okay, these are my people. This is my crew. And that's what Liquid Death feels like as well.
That's wild. And then, yeah, because I think that why I love festivals, and I haven't been to, well, I'm trying to think the last one I went to, but I remember I used to religiously go to festival when I was like 20 to like 24. And it's almost, as you say, it's that connection, but then you can almost view reality with like a slight twist. Do you know what I mean? Like you're still surrounded by people, but there'll be like some. I think the thing I saw at Glastonbury last year is like that Shell shop or something like that. It's just something you recognize. You have the semiotics of the Shell garage, but they've just completely usurped it. And I think there's something in that for brand building. Final question, mate. And I'd love to know kind of. I ask this to all guests, but I think with your lifestyle lens, it could be really interesting. But what would you say in one sentence is a brand? It's a hard question. Don't worry, get me wrong. I've asked it to loads of guests, and it's hard.
I guess a brand is something that people resonate with. So, it goes like, it's not a name, it's not a product, it's not service. It's like, what is that feel? How does it make you feel? What is that feeling? And how do you kind of connect with it? Whether it's a company or whether it's a.
And how do you completely agree? And then just to go into that a little bit further, like I love what you said there. It's not a business, it's not a service. It's a thing to connect to. At Liquid Death, with everything we've discussed today, the festivals, the surfing, how are you as a team like driving that connection? We've talked about the distribution in the right stores. We've talked about going to Tesco. We've talked about the US, but like, how are you driving that connection?
So purely from the lifestyle perspective, it's like, what are for us, for myself and my team, it's kind of looking at going, the core values and the core DNA of the brands, like what is that? And I've sort of dissected it into, I guess, music, comedy, art, street culture. They're kind of like the pillars of like the culture, like the subgroups and the cultures that we like appeal to or we are part of. So that's kind of how I would say, like, it's sort of how we're kind of managing or how we're looking at it in a liquid death, and then obviously it kind of gets subsected, all those things. You know, you can kind of there's a lot of different crews, different cultures, different communities that are all part of those things.
It's there's a guy who they sponsor our podcast called Perry Hayden Taylor, who did loads of the brands, like he did Tyrrell's, Charlie Bigham's branding. But he has got a quote that I love, which is like, your vibe attracts your tribe, but also your tribe can tell you what the vibe is. And I think if you're almost reverse engineering it, you're saying, right, when you go to all these festivals, what are they telling us, and then building it that way, which I think is fascinating. But Oli, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a perfect way to spend a Monday morning, mate. And I loved just hearing the way you're building the brand, which is ultimately, in the UK at least, or in Europe at least, is bottom up, is finding these early adopters, and but then also linking it to this idea that humans, no matter where they are, need community and they need some sort of escapism, and you can get that through kind of dedication and curiosity. So, mate, thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.